I'm from SDS, Students for Democratic Society, the group putting on the event for tonight. SDS, we're a radical multi-issue student and youth organization working to build power in our schools and our communities. We are an entirely student and youth-led movement, and we've had active chapters in high schools, colleges, universities, and cities all over the country. So we're a national organization. You're going to hear more about our group and what we've been up to later on when Max speaks, so I'll just leave it at that for now for SDS. Also, there's a clipboard going around, I think, maybe, perhaps, for SDS, so go ahead and sign that if you want to hear more about our group. I'll take it over to Marty.
Yeah, not just like a little spiel and like why we're all here and all that. Yeah, I'm Marty. I'm also in Students for Democratic Society, and we call it the Student State of the University because we believe that President Kaler's State of the University address did not describe the real state of the university. That sounded very dark. Thus, we wanted to create a space where folks can bring up and discuss the real state of the university and the conditions that students face on campus. In addition, we hope that this discussion will continue to grow the solidarity networks between students and student groups in our community. That being said, we might as well go on and get started with our speakers. Our first speaker is Javaris Bradford. He is the Vice President of the Black Student Union. The Black Student Union has led multiple struggles on campus this year, including a solidarity rally with Mizzou students protesting the racism of university administrators, a walkout of 100 students on this campus to demand justice for Jamar, and now they're here today to talk about the issues Black youth face on our campuses. So, give it up for Javaris.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Okay, cool. So I'm actually president now. So I was elected vice president, and now I'm serving as president. So, like you said, wonderful introduction. My name is Javaris Bradford. I'm a senior studying sociology with a minor in African American and African Studies, and I am the president of the University of Minnesota Black Student Union. I want to say thank you to Students for Democratic Society for having me. So we should give them a round of applause. The opportunity to speak. And so, I don't have a lot of time, and just in general, whether it be this event or just in life, period. So I'm just going to get straight to it. The University of Minnesota, President Kaler, Black students at the U feel absolutely ignored and neglected with our needs and wishes and desires for a university that doesn't have professors that are racially insensitive from time to time, that doesn't have detrimentally expensive college tuition, that can provide me with a safe campus climate, because oftentimes interaction with non-minority students can be pretty hostile, right? So waiting on President Kaler to address the needs, waiting on this institution to address the needs of African American students at the University of Minnesota is like being a 55-year-old retiree waiting on a Social Security pension. In other words, I was promised it, but in reality, it's not going to actually happen or come, right? And so it's this type of reality that we're dealt with. The university loves to exploit the racial experiences of us as minority students, but does not care to meet our needs whatsoever. President Kaler was challenged at his university address, and he was asked about the BSU and his efforts towards minority students. First off, he got a name wrong. He called it the BSA, Black Student Association, so that says a lot right there. But the point in case is too often times what we hear and what we learn is that, as President Kaler put it, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And the needs and wishes of students of my experience, my skin color, continuously go ignored and delayed. And as Martin Luther King said, justice delayed is justice ignored. I paraphrase that. That's not exactly it. But my point is still clear. So I just want to say a little bit more, but I want to make it clear that we feel absolutely ignored, that the University of Minnesota is not addressing our needs, and honestly, it wouldn't be so much of a problem if the university didn't talk such a good game about diversity, right? The fact remains that for every 2 African American students admitted into the University of Minnesota, only 1 graduates. Out of 50,000 students that are at this institution, only 4% are African American, are identified as such. That's 2,200. roughly. We can do better than that. And our athletic department is proof and evidence of that, right? Again, going back to this exploitation aspect, when we can make money for this university, when our bodies and our work ethic can be exploited for this university's benefit, all of a sudden you see us here in droves. If they can find athletes and give them Division I scholarships and track them in the 9th and 10th grade, they can do the same for inner city youth, right? They can track them in the 7th and 8th grade and make sure that they have the resources necessary to succeed at this institution. Because I had to jump over hell hurdles to be admitted into this institution, just to get here and not have any help or support and resources to be able to sustain myself at this institution. But we want to go on and on about how the University of Minnesota is so diverse and such a great place to be and be a student. It's a bunch of BS. And I'm not here to continue to allow it to go on. I'll call out President Kaler. I'll call out any student organization, any individual that wants to sit and act like everything is all fine or ignore the needs of a student organization. The last thing I want to say is I want to briefly address the Minnesota Student Association. In the actions yesterday with the U of M Divest bill that was taken off, that they didn't even want to have a discussion.
Right.
Now, before I go any further, I want to be clear that the job that Abir and Joel are doing as president and vice president, they're doing a great job. But MSA as a whole, you know, God forbid that the student governing body reflect the values of minority students at the university. God forbid, you know, you do something to help us, right? It's time for us to seriously address, yeah, President Kaler's got some work to do, but we're students, and that organization has a lot of power. And so I'm going to start with us, and I'll leave you with this challenge of, if you're not uncomfortable, then you're not helping. If you are a person that identifies as non-minority, white, or if you have any sort of privilege at this university, if you're not uncomfortable, you're not helping me. So don't act like you are, and don't act like it's all okay. We didn't even want to have a conversation. It's one thing to listen to someone and respectfully disagree, but to vote to have the discussion removed from the agenda, now that's just obscene. We deserve better. The Minnesota Student Association can do better. Point blank, period. We need to address the whitewash culture that's going on in the Minnesota Student Association, straight up. And I'll say it because I guess I'm one of the only people that can say it, but it's the truth. So I'll leave you with that. Again, thank you for your time. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you all may have.
Thank you very much, Javaris. Next up, we have Nicholas Goldsmith, President of the Council of Graduate Students, an organization set up to help represent graduate students in their affairs at the university. Nicholas has been active in raising questions regarding the university's affairs and demanding accountability of the type of programming the university offers. Please welcome Nick.
So when asked to speak on the issue, on the state of the university, the very first thing that came to my mind was mental health. The Council of Graduate Students has heard clear and resoundingly that mental health is a vital issue on this campus. And I do think some of the administration cares. Recently, 2 counselors for Boynton were expedited in terms of their hiring process, and the Student Counseling Service was given money to hire 2 temporary counselors. But I really think the problem is the commitment doesn't go all the way up. We need a commitment from the very top on the issue of mental health, from President Kaler himself. This is a campus and system-wide issue that requires the leadership of a president. And so the state of this university is a need for mental health care. The next thing I then thought about was student activism, and I in part thought about this because of mental health. So the Council of Graduate Students passed a resolution asking for expanded mental health services, talking about how the wait lists are too long, people fall into attacks on case management. And we followed the process sort of as it was laid out to us, the proper channels and how they were communicated. You know, we were deliberative, we had 2 readings in our General Assembly, we were consultative, we met with everyone in the administration who would talk to us. And yet, after we passed the resolution, we were chastised for passing a resolution. So even when we take the proper channels, they're not happy with what we're doing. And you know, Javaris mentioned the MSA resolution, and I think that's another area where you see student activism really under fire. So, you know, the MSA was prepared to have a thoughtful, I at least hope a thoughtful debate on a topic that students care about, right, with the divestment resolution. But the administration came in and squashed that, deciding to release a statement before the students were able to debate this issue. Like, the student government should be able to debate issues they care about. You know, we've seen the squashing of student activism with the retaliation against the Who's Diversity protesters. You know, all throughout the process, people were pointing out that the path that the administration was taking was not the right one, and yet they insisted that that was the path they had to take. What I really think is going on with a lot of this student activism is a university obsessed with public relations. So they can't stand us debating resolutions because that could be bad PR. You know, and they're really worried about the kinds of statements that we might be making because that could be really bad for PR. And so the state of this university is one of PR obsession. One thing that I've been saying a lot to administrators lately is that students want to be not just a part of decorating the cake that is university policy and procedure, but really a part of baking the cake. So this is currently happening with the Student Code of Conduct. The Board of Regents has asked the administration to open up and examine the Student Code of Conduct. So they are right now in abstract asking students about how we feel about aspects of the Student Code of Conduct, and then they're telling us that once they have draft language, they'll come to us again and ask for our non-binding feedback on that language. But we want to be a part of crafting that language. Like, it's our Student Code of Conduct. We should be a part of setting that. So the state of the university is one in which there is a need for true shared governance. Also, President Kaler spent a part of his State of the University address discussing free speech. And I think that his definition of free speech is what white, straight, cis men can say and have access to. What those of us with privilege in one aspect or another can say or do. You know, it's not what the scary brown people can do, or even if I change my hats, you know, what those scary queer people do. You know, they're really, when they say free speech, they mean the modes of discourse available to those in power.
Right.
And unfortunately, for marginalized students, and for those of us who have aspects of our identity that are marginalized, sometimes the way that we have to speak is to be disruptive. And so saying that you're for free speech but not disruption is fundamentally missing the ways in which we have to express ourselves and the ways in which we have to be heard. So the state of the university is one that needs to listen to diverse voices. So I could go on with other issues that graduate students face, like childcare, you know, the need for a better communication of what exists in terms of parental leave, in terms of fair notice of funding. But I really think those 4 topics are the highlights of the state of the university that graduate students are often facing. So thank you, and I'll take questions.
Nick. So our next speaker is Joanna Nunez. She is a first-generation PhD student or candidate in the Department of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies. She is a longtime member of Who's Diversity, which has led multiple struggles on campus challenging the administration on issues of diversity and inclusion for marginalized students. So please welcome Joanna.
Thank you. Thank you, SDS, for hosting us and for having us here. I want to talk a little bit more about my process of coming to the university because I'm originally from Nevada, and as a graduate student, when we're recruited, this language of diversity is in big part one of the reasons why we come here, right? So when this university recruited me, like it claimed to be a safe space for students and not for students of color, for example, but also a space that really wanted to engage with what we had to say, right? And coming here to this university, that was not my experience in classrooms and even outside of that as an activist. And I don't think that the university understands that as historically marginalized people, when we leave our communities in a sense to come here, that we are bringing them with us, right? And that those issues continue to matter to us, and that we can't be disconnected from that, and that activism is a central part of our lives in order to survive in this institution and to survive in this country, right? And so that's why I got involved with forming Who's Diversity. Now we've been organizing since December of 2013, and really at that time what we did was come together with the intention to transform this university and to envision and create a radically different institution. And I think that scares this institution, right? This university, this president, that we're not just going to settle for whatever they want to give us, right? That we're not just going to be grateful for whatever concessions the university is willing to give us. This institution uses words like diversity, engagement, and community as like empty rhetoric that really masks the oppression that happens here. But what we really want to do is acknowledge and continue in the tradition of the social justice movements that gave us those words, right? And my colleague and friend and brother who's no longer here, Jesus, made that point, right? Those terms, diversity, inclusion, engagement, those were all words that came out of spaces like the ethnic studies department, spaces that continue to be marginalized here, but the university has co-opted that language, right? So since we organized the sit-in in last year in February, a lot of other students have come forward and come up with their own list of demands, right? BSU in solidarity with Mizzou, SJP, the API community for equity and diversity, Adelante, and so forth, right? And when we created our original list of demands, which includes more than 30 demands, we said, this is a growing list, and it's not in any way the end-all be-all of what we need, because we know our community's needs are always changing, right? And also that as we continue to engage with the community, that those demands will reflect what the community needs, right? So during the sit-in, we narrowed down a few demands that included issues like hiring someone for the Chicano Studies department so that department didn't cease to exist. And we were given, at that time, one hire, right? And I know that David is going to speak more about this. But there were a few things that were met that in some ways that the university has kind of celebrated as having met all of our demands, when we know that there's a larger list of documents. And another, for example, was for the removal of the racial descriptors on the crime alerts, right? I'll just give you all a second just to tell you.
SJP has arrived, I believe.
So at the time, they immediately said that they were gonna remove racial descriptors from the crime alerts, right? But if any of you have continued to receive crime alerts, then you know that in some ways, that language and that coding is still there, and that the way that this university treats students of color is still very much a reflection of how it sees us as criminals. So what I really wanted to make the point about the demands is that I hope that you all are not swallowing the BS that the president is giving us in his State of the U speech and in other spaces when he says that he is engaging with us and that he's meeting these demands, because what they gave us are crumbs to kind of like silence us, right? And not only did they give us these crumbs, they also literally silenced us by putting us in jail and by making us go through a 1-year process of fighting student conduct charges. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's definitely part of what we saw in the last year as like central to our work, which was really critiquing and pushing back on the university when it tried to criminalize us and to have us accept student conduct charges as though we really were trespassing when we have a right to be speaking in the university's to the university president, right? I also wanted to address this whole idea of freedom of speech because it was a big part, as you mentioned, of the president's speech about how, you know, that he said, for example, that the freedom to speak at this university should not involve language that angers others or should not include shouting and bullying, were his words. And I agree with the folks on this panel who have said that really, you know, that is a reflection of how this university sees us, that even when we sit in meetings, even when we're using the calmest of tones that we can possibly gather when we're facing someone who is responsible for so much violence against students, even when we use, you know, those calm tones or whatever, we're still seen as uncivilized and as uneducated. And really, you know, as a threat to other people. And I think, you know, like we did feel the need to use, you know, direct action by sitting in, but we have done so much more than that. And for the president to continue to reduce us to that and to say that we're bullies, I think, again, it's a reflection of that. So I hope that we can continue that conversation, but that we also, as Rasan and David, who were the folks who challenged the institution, that we not be paralyzed by the threat of arrest or the threat of student conduct charges, because those threats are bullshit. And at the end of the day, it's just, you know, it's again a reflection of how the university sees us, but we can't be stopped by that. And finally, I wanted to say, well, actually, I have so much more to say. Yeah, but I'm not going to go there. I'm glad that all of you are gathered here, and that folks are pushing demands, and that we're making demands at the institution because, you know, this university kind of tries to also reward us in some ways, right? It handpicks students of color, gives us, you know, scholarships in the name of the president, and tells us to be good, respectable people of color, you know, because we were handpicked. But that's not who we are, and we can't accept that. We can't play into their respectability politics. We do have to make demands of the university, and I hope that we can come together, because initially when we envisioned the demands, we envisioned that that they would be informed by all of the organizations on campus that serve the needs of historically marginalized students. And so our last call, I guess, is to come together. We are asking that folks who are here today, who have demands of this institution, who are representing the needs of historically marginalized students, form a coalition in order to do this work. And we'll be sending out more information about this, but tentatively we've envisioned it for, you know, after spring break, so that we can start meeting on a regular basis to support each other and do the work that we're doing. So yeah, that's my final point.
Thank you, Joanna. Next, we're going to hear from Max Franz, a member of our own Students for a Democratic Society, our group that brought you this event today. And since we kind of already gave a spiel, we'll just go ahead and let you take it away, Max.
Cool. Well, I wanted to thank you all again on behalf of myself and behalf of SDS for coming to this event today. SDS pushes students to envision a different kind of university, a truly public university and a more just university, which is part of why we're here today. At its core, a truly public university would be accessible and accountable to the public, which is why SDS demands from the administration to first drop tuition so that working class families can come here for school and that we as students aren't trapped with a lifetime of debt. Tuition has skyrocketed in recent decades from $3,100 in 1995 to over $12,000 this year, effectively quadrupling it in 2 decades. 3 years ago, SDS fought to pressure President Kaler and his administration to adopt a tuition freeze, to put tuition rises to a student vote and give administrators a pay cut of 10%. This was partly done through a tremendously successful all-student referendum SDS organized, which passed with an overwhelming 85.5% of the student vote. While SDS ultimately holds a strategy of direct action, the referendum was a success that put necessary pressure on the administration to put our demanded tuition freeze in place after a long, successful struggle. But a tuition freeze is only one victory in a larger struggle, and threats of tuition increases are still happening. This May, the Board of Regents plans to vote a tremendous increase to out-of-state tuition, conveniently once most University of Minnesota students have left for the summer. It's time to reverse this trend and make the university more affordable for Minnesota's working families. We should be working towards what is stipulated in Section 12 of the University Charter, our university's founding document, which asserts that the University of Minnesota should provide tuition-free education to all residents of the state. Furthermore, as a leading source of university funds, meetings to decide a raise in tuition must be set on dates when students can attend. SDS demands that the Board of Regents move the date of the meeting to an earlier, more accessible time. Our second demand related to accessibility is to increase diversity so that our urban school reflects its urban environment, so as to serve the communities around in principle rather than in a parasitic manner, and to fund the ethnic studies department like Chicano Studies, which provide a home for many non-white students on campus and continue to educate the broader student body about the long history of struggles for justice. Today, the university's student body is 4% Black and 3% Latino, compared to Minneapolis residential demographics, which are roughly 19% Black and 11% Latino. The University of Minnesota would have to quadruple the number of these students on campus to even get close to reaching parity with our city. Action on this needs to be taken now. The University of Minnesota needs to be diversified, and ethnic studies programs like Chicano Studies need to be fully funded immediately. Our third and final demand is for the greater accountability from this administration. The Kaler administration and the University of Minnesota's Board of Regents are an unelected group of ex-politicians and CEOs who are more interested in chasing U.S. News and World Report rankings than in understanding the needs of students, staff, and faculty here. While the Board of Regents are elected by the Minnesota legislature, it is instead the students who bear the brunt of providing funds to the University of Minnesota through tuition, and yet our needs are left unheard. If students pay the university more money than the legislature, where are our votes to decide on the regents who raise tuition beyond our means? Under the undemocratic leadership of President Kaler and the Board of Regents, we've seen tuition almost double in the past decade. We've seen institutions like the General College, which actually served the interests of underrepresented and marginalized students on campus, be shut down. We've seen constant pressure and attacks on unionized workers. We've seen suicides in corporate-funded medical trials using unethical research practices. We've seen the university conduct anti-union campaigns when graduate students and workers, adjunct faculty begin to organize collectively to have their voices heard. And we've seen high-profile sexual assault allegations settled with expensive buyouts towards a man whose previously related history should have never warranted his place at the University of Minnesota in the first place. We've also seen the number of administrators earning six-figure salaries soar, with more than 14 administrators now earning more than $400,000 a year, which is the same salary, more often more than President Barack Obama makes, for comparison. We've seen fancy new buildings pop up around campus as well. We're here today to hold the administration accountable for these things. We know the money is here to make our demands a reality. Kaler has cried poverty in explaining why tuition must go up or why workers must bear the burden of budget cuts, which is an odd position for a man earning $625,000 a year and who continues to have his salary raised while programs are being cut. The reality is that the university system budget was a little over $2 billion in 2004, and now the university budget is up to $3.7 billion. The problem isn't a lack of money, but instead is the priorities of the Board of Regents. We're demanding that the University of Minnesota stand up to its mission as a public university and prioritize the need of students, staff, and faculty over its administration. The administration must be held accountable for steering our university in the wrong direction. As an organization, our strategy to win these demands is one that understands the necessity of struggle and action, and unity with other activists. We understand that with the rampant repression and stifling of student voices on campus, we must demand that we be heard and demonstrate the strength of our convictions to administration that has truly no interest in making the University of Minnesota a place for everyone. It is SDS's position that it is primarily through pressure of direct political action that Kaler's administration or any university administration will see the power of student interests, and only then can we win what we need: a truly public university, open and accessible to all. As closing words, Students for Democratic Society is eager and excited to continue our work in the student struggle with the other amazing activists and organizations here today whose tireless work inspires our student body. It's time that as students, we stand up to the hypocrisy and the lies of the administration and make our voices heard. Thanks.
Thanks, Max. Our next speaker is going to be David Melendez. He is a PhD candidate in the theater department. David has been involved in many grassroots organizing efforts, including Adelante, Twin Cities, and Who's Diversity. He has also been active in fighting back against the cuts to the Department of Chicano Studies and has been facing over the last 10 years. So, give it up to David.
Major shout out to SDS. That statement was collectively written, right?
Yeah.
That's a fantastic, man. I got like shivers hearing that. And to know that it was collectively written, that's huge. So thanks SDS for letting me be. SDS, I got to participate in the national convention this past October talking about the work that student activists are doing on this campus, and I rode with SDS and they put me up and like paid for a meal because I was like broke, so it's nothing but love. But for real, we're gonna do something totally radical right now, like the most radical thing you could imagine possible. I want you to turn to the person next to you and either, if you're comfortable with it, take their hand and just hold it, or tell them, I got your back. I don't know you, but I got your back.
My hands are a little clammy,
That shit is radical. That is radical. Radical love. Like, it's about building community. It's about writing collectively. It's about coming together in space together. So I just want to give a shout to that. Like we're here because we care deeply. And so I'll start with an anecdote really quickly. The show DJ Latinidad just opened up at Mixed Blood Theater. If you haven't gone, please go. Just go, just go, just go. What I got to see there was I was like hailed by this cast of Latinos. And this show showed queer brown Latinos caressing each other, holding each other, telling each